One, two.
Do, 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 do. Wait, we're behind. You're behind.
That was way off.
A podcast that talks about AAC on a weekly basis.
What is Talking with Tech?
Correct, Rachel. 500 points.
Amazing. Why have we shifted to Jeopardy?
Well, Jeopardy is such a fun game, and I grew up with it. I'm sure you grew up with it. So many of our listeners grew up with it. And the real reason is later on in this episode, we're going to be talking to the star of Jeopardy, Sean Sweeney.
You guys, did you know that we had our very own SLP in Jeopardy? And it was amazing. Sean Sweeney's awesome. And he talks about his Jeopardy experience on the podcast, right?
Yeah. If you're listening here and you're like, I don't know who Sean Sweeney is, I don't know what Jeopardy is. Well, okay, you can Google Jeopardy, but Sean Sweeney is speech techie. He was a speech language pathologist. He is a speech language pathologist, but I say was because he was one of the original speech language pathologists that started a blog when blogging first came out. He keeps up with it today, providing different insights into how to use technology and integrate it into your therapy. Or maybe a better way of thinking of it is how do you integrate your therapy with technology?
And this leads perfectly into what I want to talk to you today, Chris, about, because we got a question about how do I differentiate between an app and a system, right? So we're oftentimes talking a lot about AAC on this podcast. We're talking about AAC systems. We're talking about AAC apps. How do we differentiate the two?
Yeah, exactly. If there was a Jeopardy question about system versus app, it would be like an app to help someone learn language. What would you say could be the answer there?
Why, there would be a lot of apps that I could say.
Yeah, right?
What is Lamp Words for Life?
Exactly.
What is Proloquo to Go? What is Touch Chat with Word Power? What is Speak for Yourself?
Right, there'd be a lot of answers because the way it was phrased was an app, right? But the question is, what about a system? A system for how could you even answer that? Because it would be not just one app, it would be an app plus all the other different modalities someone might use to communicate. So the gestures, there would eye gaze, facial gestures, hand gestures, low tech like a keyboard, like a letterboard, or a keyboard, or a QWERTY keyboard on your phone, or a QWERTY keyboard on your iPad, or a QWERTY keyboard on your computer. All of those are different tools that help you communicate, which might make up a larger part of your system.
Yeah, and I feel like we know from AAC users who are adults that it's not just one app, right? And I think we kind of get hung up in this idea of like, we need to find the perfect app or, system. And we know that AAC users themselves have lots of different kind of modalities of communication that they cycle in and out of. And so I think it's a really good reminder that we can set up lots of different, AAC options and help our learners figure out when to use which thing, and also open it up to lots of flexibility around it, instead of getting hyper focused on one specific app.
Yeah. It's funny. You're going to hear this I can't remember if it's this part of the episode or the next part, because we talked to Sean for a while, so we decided to break this up into 2 episodes. But one of the things that he mentions is that what you don't see in the final version of the edited show of Jeopardy is that sometimes there's discussion about this. So you certainly there's judges that might come in, but that all gets edited out, right? And he said that sometimes there would be a phrase that goes up and then someone would answer it, and that wouldn't be the answer the judges or the person who wrote the question wrote the answer, and then the question is so hard to talk about it. But they didn't have the right response that they were going for. And so a committee then got together and said, well, okay, is that right? I mean, is their answer? Do they earn the points because that could have been the right answer? It could have been a response that actually matched the phrase that we were going for. So, and then of course all that is edited out. But that's exactly a parallel to choosing a system a more global system or a particular app is what we're going for here as a committee, thinking about what are the different tools and strategies that will help create the entire system for somebody.
And I think it also kind of lends itself to this idea that it's a team-based approach, right? Which we're always talking about AAC in teams. It's not just one person choosing a system, really using the SET framework, which we talk about a lot on this podcast, which is just how do we get teams on board, thinking about all the different specifics that we need to know about a student to then collectively figure out what tool we can use. And, that's something that we should keep in mind, not just during the assessment phase, but also just all along. We know if we can support communication partners in the implementation of AAC, then, our students will make more progress. And so just really making that putting that at the forefront of our minds is just being super collaborative in general. And I think when we're trying to decide, maybe we need a new support, not to say that the old, app or the current app is something that we don't keep supporting, but maybe we need to add something in addition to that. Again, I just want to kind of encourage all of our listeners to think a little outside the box and to not get stuck in this idea that everything has to happen on one app or one board or something like that. It's we can really open that up and talk with our team about what makes the most sense for our learners.
So I have a really practical story about that just literally happened today. So one of the special ed supervisors that I work with sends me a text message. Are you available right now? I was like, for you? Always, And she's like, okay. All of a sudden my phone starts ringing. Chris, we're on a break in a big meeting, and suddenly not just her, but there's a room full of administrators, right? They all come on. You're on speakerphone. Chris, here's the situation. We've got a student that is their iPad is not lasting through the day, and it's an AAC application, or it's an AAC tool. They want to use the iPad for AAC, but it's not lasting. What do we do? Let's brainstorm. And I said, well, okay, there's probably something wrong with the iPad. Let's make sure we got a new iPad there first. Wait, let's clarify. The day means from the second they wake up to the second they go to sleep. And of course, I was on the phone. No one could see me, but I was fist bumping and jumping up in the air yes, you're considering the entire day, not just the school day. But the administrators I work with are really good that way. So it's okay, well, here's the thing. We're thinking this is the one tool they'll use all day. And of course, we want that to be available, right? So let's brainstorm. Let's make sure the settings, make sure it can go through all day. What can we turn off? What can we do? There's some technical things we could do. We could make sure the iPad is updated enough that it's gonna hold the charge. But we could be looking at multiple tools sometimes, it wouldn't just be one tool. And that's getting back to this systems approach is I know the kid is likely going to be taking a shower or a bath in the afternoon, right? And you bringing the iPad in there, maybe that's the time it could be charging while you're using, again, a core board, a letter board, or multiple things, right? It doesn't even have to be one thing. It could be multiple things. So let's talk about that day, look at the schedules, and then it was well, we got to get back to the meeting, so we don't have time to do all that. But that's a great suggestion. Let's look at all the different times in between and not just get hyper-focused on the one tool all day long. It's what's the system going to be all day long.
Yeah, I feel like that makes perfect sense. And just one other thing is having those external battery chargers can be a game changer for families. And that's something I'm oftentimes recommending because we know devices die. And so having that in a student's backpack can be really, really helpful for those moments where, we're about to lose a charge. And I'll add, you can incorporate students into the charging process, because what oftentimes happens is we as adults see, oh my gosh, the iPad's dying or the device is dying, and we go and charge it instead of incorporating students into that process to teach them, look, we're about to die. We need to go find a charger. Let's go find one together. Look, we found one. Let's plug it in, right? There's core language there. And we're teaching kids how to take care of their technology, which is an operational competency skill that I feel like we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, well, and then on top of that, because all of that, yes, and choosing a tool in the first place. What's the right tool for this particular job? Now, in many cases, we're going to want that primary language system that we're working on, but not always. There might be times that a different tool would be the one that's necessary, and which case just for the particular task. So in which case, then, it's helping the person select what's the right tool, and giving them the options. And we've done stuff like that with, so imagine a choice board, right? But instead of a choice board used as some sort of behavioral control awfulness, right? Let's say it was here are some options of tools you could use to attack this. One of them, whatever the task might be, one of them could be your iPad, another one could be this letterboard, another one could be the core board, another one could be a paper pencil and you're going to write it or type it. And now you get to choose the tool from this menu and then reflect on it afterwards. Yeah, okay, so you chose that. Now, I know that's very meta and somewhere we're headed, but I think that's the mentality we want to be having, is helping the individual choose what works for them as part of to develop that entire system, bringing that back around full circle, helping them develop their entire system.
I love it, Chris. Before we head into the interview, I would love to encourage our listeners to go leave us a review on iTunes. If you love this podcast and you've been listening to it and you're like, yes, Chris and Rachel, they really helped me with AAC. We would love to hear from you. So go to iTunes, leave us a review. We would really appreciate it, and we love reading them. It kind of helps give us a little boost and bump when we're like, is anybody out there? Is anybody listening? To hear, the impact this podcast has made is super, super, motivating for us. And we also, know that that's how people will find this podcast. The more reviews that we get, the more, accessible this is to educators and clinicians and parents. And so we would really appreciate it if you go to iTunes and leave us a review.
Also, head over to speechtechie.com and leave a comment on a blog post about how you heard about the blog from our podcast, the Talking with Tech podcast.
Yeah. All right. So without further ado, we're heading into the interview that we did with Sean Sweeney.
Hello, my name is Lance McLemore, and I am a team member with Impact Voices. AAC users make up a very small percentage of the population. We are scattered, isolated, and rarely or never get to meet anyone like us. This makes it difficult to impossible to have a community. Impact Voices helps to fill in that gap. Impact Voices is a non-profit organization who supports, empowers, and connects AAC users worldwide. Impact Voices connects AAC users together to empower them to make an impact in their community. Impact Voices creates a space where AAC users of different abilities and experience come together to talk, laugh, encourage each other, and enjoy the company of others like ourselves. For more information on Impact Voices and to get involved, visit our website, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Mado, joined today by Chris Bouguet, he's always here.
How's it going, Rachel?
Good. We also have Sean Sweeney here.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Good to
we're
be
really
with you both.
We're really excited. The last time we were all together was it HAA? Or ASHA?
ASHA.
ASHA. Oh my gosh, that feels like...
Where were we? DC.
I know.
Yeah. But Sean and I don't know, Rachel, how do you know Sean?
I know Sean through you.
Oh, okay. Because Sean and I guess we should start there, Sean, is that you and I go way, way back, right? But I guess, I'm jumping the gun. Let's introduce you to people who might not know who Sean Sweeney is. So Sean, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what your background is, all that kind of stuff?
Sure. I'm a speech and language pathologist, and along the way, I became an instructional tech specialist as well. And I worked for many years in the public schools outside of Boston, in Newton, Mass. And when I veered into being an instructional tech specialist, actually at a middle school, I got kind of, to be missing my day-to-day job of a speech pathologist. And so I started a blog called Speech Techie, because before that I was like live journaling, because I was a cool that kind of cool person. And I decided I'll just, bore the ed tech world with my observations, and started just writing about things that I encountered or that I had used along the way as an elementary based SLP, like interactive websites. This was pre-iPad. And then when the iPad came out, apps, of course. And so I keep doing that 11 years later, kind of sometimes more frequently than others. But that path has led me to, do some presentations around the country, internationally, if you count Canada.
Yes, we count Canada.
So, so the blog's named after anyone who's interested in integrating technology in their work. I continue working now at what was first my after-school job at the Ely Center in Needham, Mass. And we are a social communication-focused center, and I do a lot of language therapy there as well, and a lot of consultations to schools during the day when students aren't available to be coming in, and evaluations and stuff like that. So that's sort of my mix of things that I do. I also work at Boston University now, doing some graduate student supervision, which I took on this year because a lot of that presentation stuff hasn't quite come back yet. So I'm keeping myself busy in other ways.
Yeah, so Speech Techie I think that's how we got connected back in the day, Sean, right? Is that you were writing a blog, I was doing a podcast. There weren't that many speech language pathologists back when social media was just coming out that were like stepping into that space. And so there was like, hey, there's Sean and there's Chris. And so we sort of connected that way. Is that, am I remembering? Now we've just been friends for so long. I don't really remember like when we first met.
Well, I think it was, I went to your presentation at ASHA in Philadelphia in some year, probably, what is it now? It may be something like 2012 ish.
Yeah.
And so we connected, through that. So,
but didn't we know each other virtually first before? Or do you think
probably like a Twitter? I think probably through Twitter and those channels when people are starting to connect through, who was writing blogs and, as you were, and you had your podcast and all that great stuff going on. So
yeah. And then actually, Rachel, I don't know if you know this, but we worked with Barbara Fernandez to create an app together, AT Eval to Go. It's no longer available, but we had a great time building that app together, right?
Yep, absolutely. It was a nice reporting app that we worked hard figuring out exactly, what fields we wanted to have and what the report was going to look like. And it was pretty cool. In the days of skeuomorphism, it looked like a book, where everything looked like something else. That kind of went out of fashion in design, but I recall that well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tabs.
Like a 3-ring binder sort of feel to it.
Yes.
But now, so most recently though, where you have caught some more celebrity is that you were on television recently on a little game show. I don't know if many people heard of it, called Jeopardy, right? So can you tell us about your Jeopardy experience?
Oh, absolutely. I've been a Jeopardy fan for as long as I can remember, since high school. And it's just always been kind of a thing, that quiz part of me. And I've always loved trivia, made my parents buy me all these trivia books and such when I was young. And once they started doing the online test, the Jeopardy online test, you used to have to like travel to Los Angeles to take even like the first level of the test. And once they started doing that, about 6 years ago, I started taking it annually. And this past June, I realized, kind of mid-pandemic or wherever we were, that I hadn't done it in like a year. And my husband, Chris, was out playing softball on his weeknight league. And I'm like, I'll take it now. So I did that, didn't think anything of it. And about a month later, I get an email saying like, you made it to the next level. And this is the first time I had ever made it past that test thing. I think it's kind of a combination of like how you score and also luck of the draw. There must be something else that they're doing there to figure out who goes next. Maybe some element of randomness. They won't really ever say. But so then I took another online test in a Zoom of like 30 people. Speaking of technology and optimizing technology for yourself, like, I don't know, I would say a good 1/3 of the people didn't even turn on a light, and it's like, this is still, we're nerds. Yeah. But this is an audition for television,
Yeah.
try to look your best, say hello to the person facilitating the session. So I did try to do some of those things. Took the test, heard a few weeks later, kind of like our ASHA. Remember how our ASHA notifications all went to spam that round? My Jeopardy Next Level invite went to spam, and I missed it. So I cried, and then I emailed them, and they said, "Oh, you can do next week." So that one was 9 people, and 9 people that were all professors except for me. I think because the professors tournament that was coming up, and we played a mock game, and about a month later, I got the call. They call it the call. Your phone rings, it says Los Angeles. I'm like, oh, wait. And they said, we'd like you to be here in a month. And I said, okay. And I went out there, and they tape 5 games in a day. To my unfortunate luck, when I arrived there, Amy Schneider was on her historic streak, so that's who I played, and did my best. Came out better than I remembered, and since then it's just been moving on. How many stages of grief? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, many, but it was just such a great experience of seeing the way they put it together, and the stage itself, and getting to play the game, and I think it came out. It finally aired in January, and it was during a tough time for everyone because like Omicron was surging. Everyone was like sick, and people needed something to look forward to. So like I heard a lot from people on Facebook, like, we really enjoyed kind of following you. I leaned into it, and I posted a lot of like, so here we're finally at the day, and so I think that was a nice connection with people during a time where people were a little bit less connected.
Well, Sean, I have to 100% agree with that. I remember when you shared the link after, like, today's the day, it's out, right? And and Rachel and I were texting back and forth and sharing the link. Did you get it? And then we were like, we didn't like watch it together. I mean, we were watching it separately, but together, like texting back and forth. Remember that, Rachel?
Yeah, it was fun. I was like, go, Sean, go, Sean, go. Because we saw you at ASHA and you couldn't really tell us anything. Right. And so I was like on the edge of my seat wondering like what's going to happen.
And that was like a week after a tape. So I probably looked like completely like a ghost. I'm still very deer in the headlights about the entire experience. So yeah, it took a while. What was funny, it was just preempted in my own market. So like everyone outside of Boston was watching it, and in Boston it didn't air till 2:30 a.m. On that day because of a Patriots, preview show. Stupid Patriots.
Oh man.
And so I had to just be telling everyone like DVR it. And I downloaded it on with Clip Grab, downloaded off of its illegal version on YouTube, so I at least have a digital version for people who didn't see it, and maybe it'll be a rerun at a normal hour in Boston this season at some point.
Can you tell us some fun behind the scenes? I know that like maybe some of it's secret, but like what can you share behind the scenes Jeopardy?
They already sent me my check, so I'll tell all.
Tell us everything.
My humongous check. Not quite. It behind the scenes, you go through a briefing. There was a lot of COVID stuff, around. They were very careful. We had to get tested before we went. We got tested when we arrived. And then they keep you very separate. We spent a chunk of the day on the Wheel of Fortune set doing a briefing, but there was like a big drape over the actual wheel, so I didn't get to see the wheel. And that's when I sort of discovered, there's someone who's sort of sitting apart from all of these us contestants that have just shown up with deer in the headlights. She looks pretty confident over there. I wonder who that is.
Who is that?
That was Amy. And so, they take you over, you do a rehearsal, which is great because then you get some practice on actually buzzing in. They kind of teach you how to play you could think of it as a humongous video game, really. And I think if you're a gamer, you have an advantage, to this because of the timing is just everything. Timing on the buzzer is everything. Because, as I said, like most Jeopardy players kind of know the whole board, probably would be able to respond, but it's more a timing thing. So, but they let you rehearse that, which is cool. Did really well in rehearsals, so that built up my confidence. And then I just watched 4 games before mine, which was a blast. I really enjoyed, being able to see those games play out, and in a way, it was kind of like its own practice as well. And then they pick you kind of at random for each game, so I was just kind of on the cusp of like being wrapped over into the next day, which I don't know. That might have been good, might have been bad, but I ended up playing with a teacher from Long Island, New York, and we've become actually a bunch of my tape day friends, connected over Facebook Messenger, and we talk all the time. And that was critical in the 2 months between when you tape and when you air, because you're kind of going through a little bit of a psychological landscape that isn't wonderful. When you finally see your episode, you generally are like, oh, I didn't remember any of this.
I blacked out during that entire experience.
No, it's almost just like that, Rachel. It is like a blackout. And it turns out there's some neurological reasons for that. But in everyone that experiences that. But technically there's some cool things. People are always asking. Some people have, frankly, not well-informed questions like, did they give you the questions to study beforehand, or do they give you the categories? And it's like,
is it everything a lie?
No, of course they don't. It's just, you have to know everything in the world. And one of the coolest things is when someone answers, and then they might challenge the judge's ruling on what they said, and then they'll stop the taping at a break, and they make everyone turn around from the board because like the board's active, so you could be planning like where you were going to go, and they figure that out, and then they return and they'll like, actually we credited your response as, or sometimes they take away, but so that happened a couple times during the day. But yeah, there's so much coolness to it. It was great to get a glimpse of the behind the curtain. We didn't have an audience. We were just our own audience because, COVID, but I think that was part of what helped us kind of bond. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Sean, I have some follow-up questions on some of the stuff that you just said there. So let's start with the buzzer. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you hit it too early, does it lock you out? So you have to wait? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So they kind of train you. What they say is you can look for the two lights. There's two big lights that flash on either side of the board. So when you are able to buzz in, the lights flash, meaning the clue has been completely read. So there's no way to interrupt the clue. And in fact, if you buzz in too early, you are locked out by a quarter of a second, which virtually, unless it would be otherwise a triple stumper, which virtually locks you out from responding to that, or that the person might get it wrong and it might rebound to you, which would give you another chance. But and so the producer kind of described it as too, you could time it off the last syllable of the clue, and sort of slide into clicking in. And I never understood the way she was explaining that. And they do give you feedback too. So they try to help you. Like if you're during rehearsal and in your actual game, if you are buzzing in too early, then, the producer will come over and go, she said to me, you're anticipating, like you're going a little bit too early. And that did help me, because in Double Jeopardy, I kind of got more on the rhythm of it. So
so
game.
Yeah, so that it just sort of begs the question of timing it all and practicing. Before you left, did you, like when we're playing at home, right, you can yell out the answer before they're finished reading it,
Yeah.
And so did you think to practice it all like that, like, oh, I'm going to try and tap my thigh or press a button or have a pencil and pretend that's in my buzzer or something like that?
All of the above. Yeah. I would sometimes be, just so I didn't drive my husband crazy, I wasn't always using a pen, but, I would do the tap, or, and I was doing that while I was there in the audience too. I probably could have done more of that, of everything, just realizing the importance of it. There are books written about this, I think there's one called Secrets of the Buzzer. So for anyone who gets the opportunity, I'd say prepare with that is an important thing.
So the other thing I wanted to point out about was, there's the lights that help you indicate when you could click the buzzer, but you said like slide in on that last syllable is what the advice they gave you. And to me, there's an analogy here for our podcast, is that there's a lot of educators out there that use tools that are sort of like quiz game tools. Kahoot comes to mind, or Blooket are two that are very popular. And so often what I see is teachers don't read it out loud. And so we're asking people we're asking students to, what you're really measuring when you give those sorts of quiz show games, if you don't read the question out loud, is you're measuring their reading ability, not necessarily the content, or a combination of things, right? So you think of Jeopardy as a trivia game, which of course it is, but it's a combination of lots of skills, it's listening, it's then sliding in and hitting it at the right moment. And of course, knowing the content and dealing with the pressure, right? So
there's a lot of self-regulation stories I did with my students about the pressure, because I think I've never ever been as nervous in my life as I was then. And it was just sort of this feeling of like, wow, I'm managing this. And it didn't, I looked nervous, fine, on the broadcast, but it's like a verge of panic situation. It's a lot, but you're exactly right. I mean, there's so many good tools that I always think of quiz in a speech and language therapy context or an educational context as, it's like a structured conversation. And so the questions and answers could be, you can pace that so that we can be talking about all of the things that we connect to as you read each question. So I often use quizzes, with my students in a way to foster conversation, and also, those kinds of, growth mindset things of like, let's take a quiz that you might not know everything about, because you actually learn things from, going through this. So, I love Bamboozle too. Have you used that one?
I have, but I've only ever just seen it. You know what I mean? I haven't used it myself. And nice. Quizzes is another one that people seem to like, with two Z's and two Z's. So quiz, Ziz. We put it in the show notes.
Quizzes. Yes.
So
Yeah,
something else you mentioned, Sean, as something my son Tucker was just experiencing as well. So he had just had intense, like just before we started recording, you were saying that Chris, your husband, is a teacher, and he's right now he's got AP tests going on. Well, Tucker, my son, just took a bunch of AP tests, and then in between the AP tests, he had the SATs in there, right? And so at the end of the SATs, he comes home, and I was like, "Hey, like everyone, how'd it go?" I'm like, well, he's like, "I don't know," and I'm like, "Well, how did it feel?" And he's like, "I don't know." Go, okay, tell me one question that was on the test that you felt really good about. Give me something. He's like, Dad, I really can't remember any of it. And it sort of hints at what you were just saying, is that like there's this cognitive load, this pressure that when you're intensely thinking about something or in an intense moment like that there is this amnesia that happens. You said there's some research behind it?
Yeah, well, there was a recent article. It's really kind of it was sort of a forward to an issue of a journal called Current Psychiatry. And I caught wind of it because after the Jeopardy experience, the Jeopardy crowd likes to hang out together a lot. So there's various venues. And so I'm in this Facebook group that's, Jeopardy contestants, and there's a Twitter community. And in any case, it was through the Jeopardy contestant group that someone posted the link to this. And it was called The Neurobiology of Jeopardy Champions. It was written by a Dr. Nasrallah. And it would be really interesting for any Jeopardy fan, speech pathologist, or, even just speech pathologist to check out, because he talks about how with the champs, and this is sort of written in the context of this season, has been a bunch of super champs. So there was, before Amy, there was Matt Amodio, and then following Amy, there was Matea Roach, who's Canadian, and she got up to like 22 games. And so having this, frequency of these streaks is pretty notable. But he talked about, the hippocampus, of course, is, where we, where we all, retain information, and we have to pull from there. And just being able to actually learn from encountering facts and kind of integrate it with your own biological knowledge is the process of growing these little dendritic spines. So it's actually the stuff becomes physically part of your brain, which is so interesting. The frontal lobes involved with maintaining your concentration and attention. He says Jeopardy champions, which I'm not, but that's fine. I have some of these things, I guess, are very well myelinated. So to maximize the processing speed. Of course, Broca's area comes into play for generating the language to answer, and then your speed reflexes, super important on the buzzer, just being able to time it just right and having that reflex is something that I just, wasn't quite prepared for how important that would be. But also like your visual areas, because that, as you were saying, the reading, being able to read ahead on a clue, I think is really critical. So that you're kind of reading ahead of the host. So you're already thinking like, that's what this question is. And there's so much like syntax stuff too with Jeopardy clues, because often there is, either a syntax or a semantics piece of, there's a multiple meaning going on here, or, the syntax is by its very nature convoluted, because they're wording it such that you're answering in the form of a question. So all of that is like, very interestingly, neurobiologically related. But like you said with Tucker, we actually, one of my tape day friends wrote to this professor and said, "Can you explain why none of us remember our games?" Because
why did we black out?
Yeah, why did we black out? All right, we weren't drunk, so why did we black out? And he said it was around that dendritic spine thing, that when you're in a situation where you're constantly going through this cycle of encountering language, deciphering it, trying to pull the answer, all your capacity is on that. So you may not be growing those memories of the actual experience. So a lot of us get to our episode and find, 3 or 4 instances of, I wonder who answers that one. Oh, it was me, and you don't know, because as far as I left there going, I didn't even register in that game. Like, I didn't answer anything, and that was my memory of it. So that becomes its own little form of trauma that you deal with for a few months until you see it, and I hate to say that because it's an extreme privilege to appear on Jeopardy, not only in the sense of just getting there and getting picked, and it's a privilege to appear, but you kind of have to be privileged to appear on Jeopardy. You have to have had the leisure time to spend all this, all this energy learning dumb facts, and you literally have to fund your own way there. So there's a lot of people that it would be great to get there who maybe don't have the opportunity. But yeah, so once you see it, you can evaluate your story of it. That's a real reassuring thing.